Welcome to today's episode of the Made for More podcast. I'm very excited and very much looking forward to speaking to Noa Ronen. Noa, good morning my time, good evening your time. How are you?
Good. Isn't that awesome that we can be in two different areas in the world and still chat with each other?
It's so
Um,
good.
and it's morning for you, and I'm ending my day, wrapping my
Yeah.
day, not ending. Yeah.
Yeah, very,
Yeah.
very cool.
Yes.
So before we get too far into it, I know we've been chatting quite a bit before we got started, but Noa, tell me a little bit about where you have come from and where you're going.
So probably to people that listen to me, they ask, where is she from? Because it's not Aussie accent, but I live in the US. So I'm originally from Israel. And 15 years ago, my husband and I moved for a job opportunity for 2 years. 2 years
Ah,
job opportunity to relocate to the US, to New York City. He is in the IT space. So we moved with two little kids, and that's where my life really changed. Before the move, I worked in human resources, change management consulting, and training and development. And after the move, I was stuck for a long time.
ah,
That for almost 5 years, I was stuck for almost 5 years. So the woman that helped people go through change and finding jobs, right, or helping people join as the human resources person to where she worked, suddenly was not able to conquer the change and did
yeah,
all the mistakes. So really what I do today with my clients as a leadership coach, executive coach, I help people to recreate their life,
love it.
and I actually call it encourage people to go against the norms so they can
Yep.
create the change they want. So I poke them and I help them and I hold their hand. Sometimes I also work with people from other countries that move to my area, but my focus is really leadership and what I call social leadership,
Yep.
the leaders that want to do something that is beyond just the income. There is something more that comes from the place of values.
I love that so much. Can we just backtrack a little bit? So 15 years ago, you had an opportunity for a 2-year stint in New York City and you got stuck. So tell me a little bit around, I imagine moving countries and uplifting your life with young children would have its
Mm-hmm.
own would have its
Exactly. Yeah.
own set of, I guess, limitations and challenges. But tell me a little bit around, once you got settled in to New York, and when did you realize you were stuck, and then what steps did you take to get unstuck?
So I will go a bit another step backwards,
Yeah.
and I'm going to take you back to Israel, because in
Okay.
Israel, when I was a little girl, I remember that I had that ability to influence. I realized that I'm a leader very, very young. And I believe, I don't know why, my intuition is that you had the same experience in the
Sure did.
playground, right?
Yeah.
We just know that. And I just knew that with my way of speaking in my first language, I'm able to influence people. And at very young age, I would sit in board meeting rooms with CEOs and C-suite executives, and I would share my ideas. And there was that what I call that magical silence, and then people would follow me.
Yeah.
And then I get to the US, and it's not like we don't speak English in Israel. We do. We use it a lot, actually. But it didn't feel the same way. And suddenly I hear the pardons and excuse me's, and I feel stupid. I feel
Oh,
like my strength
yeah.
became my obstacle. I
Yeah.
became handicapped in a way. And that's what really got in my way, because when I went to different opportunities or like interviews, I knew how to do that. I was in
Mm.
human resources. I knew what I need to do. I got some guidance, but there was a voice inside that was telling me, with this way of talking right now
Yeah.
or expressing yourself, you will not get the opportunity. No one will hire
Mm.
you or book you as their coach later on, or all these things that
Yeah.
happened to me along my life. No one will hire you with this English. And that's what really shifted the whole experience for me. So
Mm.
no matter how many actions I took, and that I took the same actions that I took in Israel,
Mm.
this new experience didn't work for me. It just
Wow.
didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting, you can go from having that real strong self-belief as a child, and then when you come up against an external, I guess, an external factor such as, a language barrier in this instance, where people couldn't understand what you're saying, even though you knew your stuff. And then there's this little seed of self-doubt that like pops in and
Exactly.
starts, it starts to grow and fester. And that's what happens with self-doubt when we don't get on top of it. So when you started to recognize, I guess, this thought pattern, what was it that you did to shift or flip the script is how I say it. But what did you do to shift out of that and go, actually, you know what, I do know my stuff, and language may be a barrier for some, but, my English is pretty good, and it's still the same, I guess, the same techniques, the same principles. It's just in a different language. So tell me about that.
So here is the deal. When you are in the messiness, you don't really
Yeah.
know what you're doing, right? You're just trying a lot of different things and nothing works for you. And that's where I
Yeah.
was stuck for 5 years. So and that happens a lot in situations of change. When people go through
Mm.
change, there is grief. And I didn't know that then.
Yeah.
Okay, so there
Yeah.
is, and I learned that these are all things that I know now, 15 years after. As I mentioned, we came for 2 years, but now we're 15 years in the US citizens.
Yeah.
So what I didn't know is that I was grieving. And when you grieve, there are lots of emotions and
Yeah.
thoughts. And
Yeah.
the biggest thing that happens in grief is that, we look at grief as, being sad or in pain for the person that passed away, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, what's happening there is that we are trying to redefine who we are going to be without that person. And
Yes.
that's what kicks in when we grieve. And that's what happens many times in relocation. And by the way, it happens. We talked about being moms a few moments ago.
Mm.
So it doesn't have to be a negative change.
Yeah.
It can be also a positive change. So, for example, relocation is really a positive change. Having a baby, getting married, getting promoted. They're
Yeah.
all, it doesn't have to be something negative
Yeah.
that happens in your life that you suddenly find yourself in a situation where you are not sure how to redefine yourself in this new situation. And
Yeah.
for me, I was so stuck in my past. I was that executive. I had my MBA. I came with the MBA.
Yeah.
I was a change management influencer. I want to be the same person in the US. I wanted to replicate what I did in Israel to the
Mm.
US, and it didn't work for me. And I was fighting everyone and everything, including
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
to have that. And the moment that really kind of like brought me into the level of giving up,
Mm-hmm.
and there are many different moments, okay,
Yeah.
when I look
Yeah.
back, but one of the most crucial one and the most painful one, and mostly they are painful, I believe, was that I decided to go and take a certification exam to become this.
Ah,
There isn't a certification exam for human resources. I set to study for it for, I think, 4 months, and
okay.
I didn't pass the first time.
Oh, no.
So I decided, okay, I will take that again.
Yep.
So I took the second time, took it again. And I don't remember how many points you need, but I was 6 points from passing that exam.
Oh, no.
And that was really, really painful. And
Yeah.
I can tell you now that I was really sabotaging myself while I was studying for the exam, if I will be honest. But
Mm.
getting out of that exam center,
Mm.
I remember calling my husband. I was there then in New York City, living there.
Yeah.
And I told him, that's it. I am done. I
Yeah.
am done bumping my head into the wall
Yeah.
and fighting to do what I did in Israel. I
Yeah.
am ready to give up.
Oh.
And I think what we don't know when we do that is that then we create the space for ourselves to show up differently.
Yeah.
And that's where the shift really started for me. And again, it's today 15 years after, so it wasn't like wham bam everything, she, like what you see in the movies, that in 2 moments she puts her new shoes and everything is beautiful. It's still very messy, but that was, I believe, one of the crucial moments for me,
Yeah.
that I could be able to move forward, because that was the first time I let go of the past and I said, okay, I'm not sure what's going to happen there,
Yeah.
but I am ready to surrender in a way.
Yeah. And I think that that is, oh my goodness, that was amazing. Thank you so much for unpacking that. And there's so many gold nuggets. But I think what I wanted to circle back around on is when you were talking about, grief and how what we think it is the sadness and the pain of losing someone. But really it's that shift and that redefining our identity. Who are we now without X, Y,
Hmm.
and Z? And I think we try and hold on to those, our past experiences, our past identity. And that's what keeps us anchored from being able to move forward into what it is that we actually need to be doing to create a future for ourselves. Oh,
Yeah.
that was beautiful.
Yeah. And I actually, now I wrote a book about it. I call it Beyond Leadership,
Yeah,
from
yeah,
awareness to awareness.
yeah,
And really what I learned from that experience and how I start working with people when I coach them
yeah,
is identifying, and that's my lens. Okay,
yeah,
so it's just a different lens to look at how we do and being
yeah,
as human beings, is that in the grieving process, right, there are
mm,
lots of thoughts and emotions.
yeah,
So I believe that inside us we have two main energies, and they are kind of like the yin and yang.
yeah,
One of them is the being, and one of them is the doing. So the doing
yeah,
is really what happened to me. I was focusing on the actions. I was always a doer. I
mm,
had that belief that worked for me, that through the way I influence and through my action and being very fast, I'm being seen
hmm,
and being promoted. And most of us
mm,
see the world from the lens of the action, because we heard that as little kids: be a good
yeah,
boy and clean up your room, be a good girl and do your homework. So we
yeah,
focus on that and we have that pattern.
yeah,
But what we are missing many times is the other energy, the being. And I put in the being the mindset, which is the thoughts and aspirations and fears and concerns and all the good stuff, and the emotions. So there is the
yeah,
mindset and the emotions. And I was lacking, even though I felt a lot because I was grieving, right? That's the
yeah,
paradox. I felt a lot and I thought a lot. I was exhausting myself with my thoughts,
yeah,
walking alone in the streets of New York City.
yeah,
Still, I was avoiding the being energy and focusing on the actions only.
mm,
And what I believe, that for us to see new results,
yeah,
we need to engage. So it's not like being is better than the doing or doing is better than, we need to bring them together
yeah, yeah,
and pay attention to the being energy with the doing energy.
yeah,
And that's when we start seeing new actions.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what really happened to me.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I read that before today's interview. So tell me a little bit around the being energy, because I think you say something, is it around being a human being rather than a human doing?
Yeah.
And yeah,
That's
talk to us
very,
about,
yeah, I kind of like play with that, and I say, rather than doing leadership, let's focus on how we can be as leaders.
yeah,
So again, it's not about doing is bad,
mhm,
but there are so many programs that tells us, first you need to do this, then you need to do that, right? There are all those actions that we need to take to be successful. And I
mhm,
kind of like go against that, because I say, well, it works for the person that designed that and maybe for two other people, but we can't ignore in the actions the being part, the emotions and the thoughts.
yeah,
And let me try and give an example, maybe not from my story, but from leadership, right?
yeah,
So I can have a conversation with a client and they will say, that person really triggers me. Now, if today, right, we work with the Slack and with the email, so you don't even need to be in a room with the other person to being triggered by them, right? I can see
yeah,
an email from a person and I will be triggered. I don't
mhm,
even need to be with the same experience with them, right?
yeah,
So what I really do in those moments, I tell them, okay, let's just slow down and tell me about something that happened with that person. And they tell me. And then I say, okay, what were the thoughts and the emotions that were
mhm,
showing up there? And when you were in that messy space, thinking that that person is arrogant and not professional and you're better than them, and all the good stuff that happens in those moments with that specific person that we
yeah,
all have, and
yeah,
it's mostly the same group of people that they always trigger us. when you were in that good stuff with your thoughts and emotions, with your being, what were the actions you were trying to take? And then they
Ah,
say, I was defensive and I was arguing and I was doing this and I was doing that and I would take over. And that's when they figure out that the actions they are taking are very much connected with their emotions and their thoughts.
yes.
And when they get that, sometimes they say, now I see. I
Yeah.
put that person in a box, or now I see I'm really trying to walk on eggshells, but when really what I need to do is something else.
Yeah.
So when we don't have that experience of exploring the emotions and the thoughts, we keep taking the same actions because we are on autopilot. And that's
Yes.
I was on autopilot for that
Yeah.
for those for many years, and then I kept my autopilot on my autopilot when I moved to the US.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
didn't see any change because I didn't notice my emotions and my thoughts. I was
Mm,
pushing them away because it was
mm.
too hard to handle. I
Yeah.
was ashamed, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was disappointed, all for myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe a bit about my husband who was, having a cool job, but and that's, when the shame comes. Why are you angry with your husband? Why can't you be happy for him? Right? All the good
Yeah.
stuff that shows up.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I love everything that you said just then. As you know, we talked about this before. Courageous conversations are totally my jam, and it's very much
Mm,
around how many of your thoughts are actually sabotaging your actions, and how can you flip those thoughts to be more productive and helpful in terms of being able to not be triggered by someone, be able to have a useful conversation. I love it so much.
yeah,
Um,
and it's so important to have those, and when they learn to have it with themselves, right?
oh
Because
yeah,
we can't do the work as a team if we don't know to do it with ourselves, and we
a
can't
hundred
be
percent.
different leaders for other people if all we do is beat ourselves up, right?
Yeah.
How can I show up differently to other people if I don't know to do it with myself?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And
yeah,
if you don't even have that awareness as well, then it's very hard to make any change
yeah.
too. So you mentioned around when you were before you came to the US to New York that you were doing change management. So that was about 15 years ago. I'm not sure how long change management's been around. It's certainly, I don't think it's been around for 15 years in Australia, that's for sure. So was it quite,
Really?
I don't think so. I mean, I got
Hmm.
into change management back in 2009 and it was relatively a new concept
Mm-hmm.
back then. So what's that, 11 years ago? So tell me a little bit around how you got into change and what you're seeing from when you first entered change to what you're seeing now. I mean, this year's obviously everyone has had to go through some level of change. So I think we're
Right.
really seeing the people that can cope well with change and the ones that are struggling.
Yeah.
So talk to me about change.
It's kind of interesting, and I'm just going to write a word to myself that I don't forget, because sometimes I get so excited when I start talking about topics, and I don't want to, take the whole airtime. So, um, when I got into change management, I worked in a consulting firm, and we would actually help implement new technologies. But now, when you think about it, it's even more than 15 years. It's almost 20 years ago, because I worked in Israel in that area for many years. So then companies would bring really expensive technologies. The ERP just started and all that good stuff. And the fear was very different than today. The
Ah,
fear was that the technology is going to take my job, right?
okay. Yeah.
So I was in my 20s when, now people can do the calculation, but I was in my 20s when I started doing that. And it was so interesting to see the fear when you come and work with people and they are so afraid that their city is going to be taken because their knowledge is going to be now inside the system, inside the
Mm,
technology.
mm,
And my role was really to create that trust and
yeah.
make sure that we help everyone work together, so they get to the other side where the users can work independently with no pain, which is
Yeah.
not easy, because people do all these really funny things. They see a bug, so they don't talk about it, and they just go around it, right?
Yeah.
There are all these really so it was really interesting time for me to be exposed, because I it was all new. in the corporate world. It was a new space, and I was able to help all the executives work together to create success. And there was a lot of tension in that space between the executives. And
Mm.
I would also help the managers how to create trust with their people. And I
Mm.
also had a group of trainers that got all the good stuff from, this is not working, and this is not working, and this is
Yeah.
not working. So it was really interesting because at a very young age, I got to understand organizations from, from so many different perspectives. So it was really,
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
And I think what you see today is that the pace is much, much faster.
Yep.
If we compare it to 20 years ago with the email, when I started, the Wi-Fi was still, right? It was still dialing, right? The dial-up Wi-Fi
Yeah.
when I started working. So the pace today is, it's just so
Yeah.
crazy, and the
Yeah.
parallel things that people need to do. So at least what I believe, that the successful leaders are the people that can adapt really fast
Yep.
and learn really fast, and so what they call the agile
Yeah.
leader, that are able to really tweak and bring the different strengths, or the different people in the right time. And I
Mm.
actually believe that in when I look to the future, I
Yeah.
believe that the leader will be the resources getter,
Yes. I
because the
love that.
Generation Z, they want to be entrepreneurs. So companies will need to allow them to create their, their hotspot. How you call those? Help me with my English. I lost the word, but kind of like have their hubs
Yeah. Like, yeah.
where,
Hubs is right.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So create those hubs that they develop what they believe, and
Yeah.
the leader will be the person that brings the resources or help them find the resources. So they will be
Yeah.
less about and more about coaching. So that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Now, if we connect it, that's what I wrote to myself on the side that I won't forget. So what I think is very interesting, and I work a lot with leaders around that,
Yeah.
is that the same way there is the being energy inside us,
Yeah.
I also believe that there is the being of the system.
Yes. Right. Talk about that. Oh, this is fascinating. Keep
Right?
going.
That's interesting. So that's what I like to talk with leaders. And the being of the system is really the emotions and the thoughts that people have as a whole. Because the same story, right? I talked about the grief.
Yeah.
When there is a change, people go through grief. And
Hmm.
there are lots of emotions. For example, right now I work with a client from a pharmaceutical company,
Yeah.
and and people are being shifted from one location to a different city, and they are shuffled with managers, and their direct reports are being shuffled. And there was an event, they start talking with them about a change that will happen in 6 months, and the managers just blasted. They were so
Oh,
upset with the event, they sabotaged it and said, well, that was a good waste of money and time.
oh dear.
um, and that's exactly what the being of the system does.
Mm.
The emotions and the thoughts slow the person who tries to create the change, and
Mm.
even stops them, because those leaders run too fast into the action
Yeah.
without paying attention to the being of the system. And that's where they fall, but they can also change it and pay attention to the being energy of the
Yeah.
system,
Yeah.
and approach it. And what I believe, to create trust, what we forget sometimes as leaders and also as individuals, when we run too fast into the action, or we ask people about that being space, we ask them, we say, let's create those courageous conversation, right?
Yeah.
And tell me what's going on. But to make that safe space, to create that trust, I believe
Mm.
that the leader has to be the first to go.
Mm.
And
Yep.
that's why my tagline is dare, from daring, from courage, dare to be. It's
Yeah.
that courage to be the first to say, I can see that there is resistance, I can see something is not working with my idea or with the change we're trying to create. Let's
Yeah.
talk about it, and I'm going to start first.
Yes. I
And
love
that's for
it.
me, yeah.
Keep going, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. That's for me the courageous parts, that dare to be, but not only expect that from your people, but be
Mm,
willing to be the first to do the work.
yes. Oh my goodness. That I'm going to re-listen to this when we finish up. Oh man, that was so good. Now, where do I want to go with that? That was, oh, I love it. And I think what you're saying around the new age of leadership, and this to me is really fascinating. And I think this year has probably sped up the 5 year, the 10-year future
Yeah.
of leadership. And I very much have that belief that, I work with a lot of new and emerging leaders, and they have this
Mm-hmm.
common belief that they have to know everything. And I'm forever being like, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know where to find the information. So what you're saying
Yes.
around, the future of the leader is actually going to be the one that can connect all the dots, that, that sense making leadership where they're going to be going, okay, well, we need to do some kind of systems here that also needs to be able to talk about customer experience, that also needs to be able
Mm-hmm.
to tie in with the training needs of the rest of the team. And I think, I love that this is your thoughts on the future of leadership. I hope that that's the way it goes, because I think
Yeah,
that's important.
yeah, I believe that even though we might experience more of that social connection, moving more to the remote way of working, and it
Yeah,
probably but people will still, after the COVID that we're right now in,
yeah,
we'll go back, because we are social human beings, so we'll need to be with each other. But it's going to change a lot. It's not going to be the same.
yeah,
And that's why I believe the leader will be the one that creates those connections with the right people,
yeah,
and will be able to bring those people that want to create the good stuff and say, hey, go to that person, and go to the other person, and go to that external resources, and help them connect, because
yeah.
that's at least how I see it. And
Mm,
it comes from the place, when you see leaders, right? So when they start, there is that, I want to be at the front, right?
mm,
I want to
yeah,
lead everything. I want to show everyone that the trust you gave me to lead and take that right thing, and influence, and create a change, or whatever it is that I'm expected. I want to show, right? That's the action, right? I want to show that the trust you put in me is being seen,
yeah.
okay? That I'm delivering, right? But with maturity, you can see some leaders that they start leading from the sides. And
Hmm.
you shared with me, you took that part too, because a leader that start taking the coaching skills and use them with their people, it means that
Mm,
I'm willing to stop finding solutions for you people, and
yeah,
controlling, right?
yeah,
Controlling how you do that, and I'm starting to coach you to find the solutions, and become independent thinker.
yeah,
And then you can even move to the back. You don't need to
yes.
lead from the front. And for me, the joy today is to see when leaders go to the back, or when I lead sometimes, and I can see people take the lead, and I can go to the back and just watch them. It doesn't mean that there will be situations when I will take the front, but
Mm,
it's again that agility, that ability to
yeah,
not being stuck at the front all the time.
yeah. Oh, I love everything you're saying. I'm like speechless nearly, which is very unusual for me. And I love that is your belief, and I 100% believe that that is the way that leadership will be going. It's so cool to hear someone else talk about it that way.
So
And I think,
can I ask you, one host said, ask me a question. So can I ask you a question? Can I break the
yeah,
rules?
sure.
So you shared with me that 15 years ago you decided to go and get the skills of coaching. Can
Yeah,
I ask you, I'm always curious about what made people, even 20 years ago, right? When the coaching is a really new profession.
yeah.
So what made you then still working inside a company to do that?
Mm. This is an awesome question, actually. And I've talked about this a little bit on when I'm a guest on a podcast. So, about 15 years ago is when I sort of started my leadership journey in corporate. And I was very young, I was in my very early 20s, and had a
Wow.
couple of really good teams that I recruited. One of them's my husband. I'm sure he works about that as well. He was one of my first staff members that I recruited, and then married later on. And what happened was, after that high performing team that I got to curate, I was the resourceful leader. I was like, I don't really want to do that bit. That's not my strength. But this person over here, they're really good at that. So I'll bring them in
Hmm.
and brought in this high performing team. And then around GFC time, global financial crisis, team was disbanded, and I ended up going to within a new team, within a new office, still part of the same organization, but it was a team that I guess had quite a bit of, not toxicity, but like conflict. They didn't get along. They hated each other. And then I like traipsed in there with my high heels and my ponytail in my 20s. And they were just like, we are not listening to a single thing you say. And I was kind of brought in to, fix, air quotes, the situation. And I got a coach because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need some help. Well, I tried really hard. It didn't work. And I was like, okay, we need to try a different way. And so I got a coach and went deep into some leadership training and was like, you know what, I just need to improve my leadership skills. And then a lot of what I learned during that process and from my coach, I started implementing around, asking better questions, you get better answers, and started to do that quite naturally as part of, I guess, my own way of getting out of this toxic team environment that was, getting a little bit crazy, and it was taking up a lot of emotional energy that I didn't, there was 14 of them. I didn't have enough emotional energy to expend on 14, different sets of conflicts. So I was like, okay, the best way out of here is to build better relationships and empower these people to have, improve their own career, improve their own knowledge, capability, all of that type of thing. And then if we take it back even further, before I started in corporate, I used to be a ballet dancer, a professional ballet dancer. And then before that, I used to coach ballet students in performance and things like that. So I've been doing coaching for a long time. It's probably, I didn't realize what I was doing until it had a label, because you're right, it is a relatively new industry.
Yeah, so you moved from one way of dancing, right? To, in coaching, we say dance in the moment with your clients, right?
That's right.
Yeah. That's cool. Thanks for sharing.
No, thank you for asking. So you actually mentioned something, this is another common thread we have. Well, I think we might do part 2 of this, Noah. You mentioned around being a bit of a disruptor, and I am definitely a disruptor. I don't like to follow rules mostly or trends. And you talk a little bit about paradoxes. So tell me about your thoughts on paradoxes.
Oh my gosh, you caught me unprepared. But for me, it's really listening to clients or people in general, because we get so stuck that there is one way or another. We're kind of like stuck in that either or. And I like to then, that's where the fun stuff starts for me, So for example, one of the big one for me is, for example, I was lost, right, for 5 years. But so when people come to me and they say, I feel lost, I get excited. Because I know that when people are lost, it's when they are going to commit to create the change. Right.
Awesome.
So, but it's not a survival loss, but it's just understanding that I need to start changing what I do because what I do is not working. And that's when people are willing to commit to the process. So that's one paradox that is really fun for me. But mostly it's when you listen to people, and I grew up in a way, my father used to say, don't ever take the expert as the stamp. Okay, so when you go to a doctor or when your teacher is telling you something, always check the data. Always check and don't take authority except me or daddy, right? So don't take any authority as the kind of like the only way of doing things. So when you are being raised this way, and by the way, it's also a bit culture thing in Israel to always, when someone says we need to do it this way, so Israelis will say, but why?
I didn't know that.
There is always that, but why? Why can we do it differently? So when I listen to clients, and mostly it's in that space of, there is one way or another way, I will push back and say, I actually think that there might be a third way. So I'm just going to give you an example that really, and I think it's so relevant that is to what's happening right now. And sometimes I hear it again and again and again. I don't know if you have that experience. So at the same week, it's kind of like the theme of the week. I am not focused. So there are sometimes the theme of the week. This week, I'm not focusing. I'm on Slack and I'm on Facebook and I'm on email, and I let myself being led by all these things, and I don't bring results. So first I start asking questions. And what I realized a few times with different clients is that because of the situation that so many people move to work from inside a company to work from home, they struggle. They don't know how to to stop working.
Yeah.
They work back to back to back to back, and they don't realize that their new situation is different. They should probably figure out a new way of working from home, that the schedule looks different.
Yes.
And that's when I poked a few of my clients and I say, hey, what if that time, because you are so structured and so controlling everything, that time that you are just moving from email to Slack to that stuff, it's just recovery time.
Yeah.
It's still working, right?
Yeah.
But it's a recovering time,
Yeah.
because I don't need really to think. I don't need really to focus. So for me, for example, I sit back to back sometimes from 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. because I work globally with clients.
Yeah.
So around, if I had back to back until 11 a.m. and I then do emails and just, browsing a bit and do some social media as part
Yeah.
of my business, I used to be so upset with myself. But now I realize that it's recovery time, because
Yeah.
I am giving for 5 hours. I'm listening, I'm focusing, I am making sure I'm giving my best to the client, and then I can just calm down and do my thing. And this is where I see those really I will call them cute paradoxes, right?
Yeah.
that what we see in one way, actually there might be a different way to look at them. So it shows up many times in different situations. So I hope this example was helpful just for the
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there is, we do kind of get culturally conditioned to believe that there's the right way and the wrong way, as opposed to there being
Yeah.
multiple options.
Yeah.
As a yeah,
No, keep going. Yeah.
I was going to say, as a kid, I was a huge fan. You may or may not be familiar with the books that were like choose your own adventure, and you'd read a few pages, and it would be like, if you want to go forward through the blue door, choose page 72. If you want to go around to the road on the right, choose 84. And I loved reading, and I used to go through it and change my option every time, so I actually got to read the whole book and had multiple endings.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are so many ways that we go with the norms, and we actually get in our own way,
Yeah.
because this is how other people do things.
Yep.
And what I tell people, why are you going against yourself? I have a
Mm.
really fun example from this week. A client said, well, I always procrastinating things. So I will look at my calendar and I will put it on Wednesday. And I say, look at me. Are you going to do it on Wednesday? And he said, no way. And I said, Thursday. He said, no way. I said, so you're going to wait for the last minute and do it on Saturday? And he said, yes. And you know what? When I procrastinate, actually, I do a lot of other stuff that is important. And then I sit and I never got in trouble for procrastinating. So I said, so maybe that's your system. That maybe that's where you are at your best. And by the way, there are assessments that will tell you that doing things at the last minute to some people will bring them better results
Yep.
than if they start doing them before, and they will not see the results the same way. Actually, their best outcome will be if they will wait for the last minute. So it was just funny. And I said, so why are you fighting yourself and you're going to put that task on Wednesday when you know you're not going to touch it? And then you're going to sit Wednesday evening and you're going to have the guilt and all the good stuff, and you're going to beat yourself up. And those are the paradoxes that you see. And I say, stop working against yourself, work with what's working for you, and make things better for the things that not working for you. So those are like little paradoxes, right? Because it's like procrastinating. Should I do that? Sometimes you should.
Oh my goodness. I'm giggling because you just explained me. I'm a classic. I deliberately put things off until the very last minute because I know that I perform best under pressure. And perhaps it's all those years of being on stage. And, when the curtain goes up, I'm like on. And the very same thing happens if I've got a deadline. I'm like skidding in to home base at the last minute.
So I have to tell you, I am also the same. I fought it for years with myself until I realized that really the best outcome, I'm also speaking on stage. So my best outcome when I'm preparing a speech or workshop or what, I don't know, whatever it is, the best outcome will be if I will wait for the end. And there is actually, if you check the book Stretch, or interviews with Scott Sonnenschein, he explains, Brene Brown interviewed him and she said, can you explain to me because I procrastinate? And what he said, when you sit and you watch that Netflix show, or when you go to the walk and you don't really work, you don't really do the work, your brain is doing the work of processing all those little things that will bring you into that moment when you start sitting and writing your speech or whatever it is that you need to work on in the last minute. So it feels like you're not working on it, but actually, if you're going to look at it, you're going to see that you cooked and you thought about something, and you took a shower and you thought about another thing. And I run. So when I run, I think about another. And there are all these different components that I am collecting. And then when I sit and I write whatever it is, suddenly they all come together. So it's actually not really always just procrastinating, but we work without being even realizing that we do the work. So that's why I call it AwareLESS.
AwareLESS. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I definitely needed to hear that today because I've been procrastinating hard. I've got a deadline that I will get done after I get off the interview to you. And it's, I've got a few hours.
So I'm just going to tell you something, and if you don't want to take that, so maybe it will help other people. Okay. But what I find is that procrastination is not really laziness. There is something that we are missing in purpose or meaning. And that's why we're not moving into, so there is some clarity that we're missing to move into action. Yes. So I always say that in resistance, there is a lot of wisdom. And that's where the being actually can really help you. And you can sit with yourself and you can say, what are the emotions and the thoughts and what the resistance is trying to tell me? And most of the time when you do that, you will realize that there is something that you're missing clarity, or there is something that you still don't understand, or that the purpose is missing, and that's why you're not moving into action. So that's another thing that I kind of like, okay, I'm not doing it. It's probably because I am still don't understand something there, and that's why I'm not moving into action. So I need to do the work, and then it releases me from that experience of guilt that eating you alive. And by the way, the other way around, if you try to make someone do something and they don't and resist you, it's better to sit with them and have a conversation. What's the resistance about? Or just trying, and mostly you will see that you didn't explain in a clear way to them, and they don't see the purpose or the meaning of on acting on what you are asking them to do.
Yes, I love that. Noa, you have been so incredibly generous with sharing your knowledge and expertise. I've loved every second of this. Before we wrap things up, what would be your 5 top tips for leaders, organizations moving forward?
Oh my gosh, I think I gave them all, right? I believe the first one is what we talked about. So I'm not sure I'm going to do 5. That's a lot, Ali.
Do you want to go 3? Top 3.
Let's start and see what's going to happen, because I can talk so much, so it can take another hour. So I'm going to try and I'm going to try and manage myself. Okay. So the first one that I think is very important: listen.
Love it.
Listen. And now I also say mute yourself. So that's my second one. Mute yourself in the remote. If you know that you are the person that always runs into solutions. So to help yourself being a better listener, mute yourself. Because there is a resonate choice. If you, rather than opening your mouth and talking, you need to make an aware choice to unmute yourself. And that's slow down the process. And that's a lot of what I try to help my clients. It's kind of like, identify the red flag and let's slow down the process that you don't run into your autopilots. So we said listen, and I also call it kind of like lean back. There is, right, the Sheryl Sandberg lean in. So I say lean back. So that's kind of like my number 3. When you want to solve the problem, lean back.
Cool.
Quiet. Now, I think it's number 4. I hope so.
Yes.
It's asking questions. And when you ask questions, there are 2 ways there are many more, but I'm going to focus on 2. One is that I have an idea and I'm going to ask questions that will be manipulative questions, or as we call them in coaching,
Yep.
leading questions. But this is not the leading questions that you want to ask. These are the questions that you manipulate people.
Yep.
So move yourself from those leading questions to lead people to answer what you want,
Yep.
and start asking questions that are explorative. And the
Yes.
best way to start is focus on what questions. And
Yep.
every time you want to ask why or how or is or do, rephrase it, as we see in those court shows. So that's my invitation. So that's number 4. And number 5, I will just repeat what I said before. Do you need to be at the front as a leader?
Oh, yes.
Or maybe when you go to the next, and by the way, you can be I see that a lot with people who even lead a project. For me, leading doesn't have to be that you have the title, but let's say that you, in one capacity, you lead something. Even when you come into the room, doesn't mean that you need to lead from the front.
Yep.
You can lead from the sides, you can lead from the back. And the best way that not the best way, but one of the ways, I'm not going to say the best way, catching myself on autopilot, is to step back, lean back again,
Yeah.
say, I identify a gap,
Yeah.
and invite the people in the room to say what they think, and then mute yourself.
Then mute yourself. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
probably the key one there, isn't it? The mute
Right.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So rather than you finding the whole solutions, rather than you telling the other people what to do, just say, okay, I see a gap. What do you think we should do around that? And
Yeah.
just let people talk, because that's how you engage people, and they want to be part of this and many times I hear leaders that will say, but then the team will say something that I don't want them to say. I say they will say things that are much better than what you think you have in your head right now. And
Yeah.
so it's really awesome to see what happens when people come back and say, that was really awesome. I was quiet for the whole meeting and people found solutions, and it's so easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't need to work hard.
Yeah.
So that may be my new number 5. You don't need to work hard.
You don't
Work
need to work
smart.
harder. We'll do 5B. Oh, thank you so much, Noah. I love this. And if any of the listeners do want to come and hang out with you on social media, where do you like to hang out?
Yeah, I am really mostly on LinkedIn. So if you want to see, I have what I call on the run videos, and actually the new ones, because of the COVID, are with my little son. So they're really,
Ah,
really fun. I call them on the run. So after we run,
yep.
I shoot a quick video. It's like 1-2 minutes. I like it short.
Yep.
So I vlog there, but I'm also on other social media. I have the same social media handle. It's Noah, Noa R, my last name, Noah R Coach, at Noah R Coach. That's my social media. You can also find me on my website, Noa Ronen Coaching, and get my book.
Get your book.
Beyond
Yes.
leadership, from AwareLESS to AwareNESS. So just look for me on Amazon, Noa Ronen again.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'll put the links to that in the show notes for
Yeah.
today as well. Thank you so much, Noah. This has been amazing. I've loved it, and have a beautiful night.
I really, really want to thank you. It was a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate inviting me to your show. Thank you, to your podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.